What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. Thank you so much for making this your first podcast for NBA coverage. Remember, you're on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. You're on Apple Podcasts, you're on Spotify. Leave that 5-star review. You do that, we'll keep producing that content. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing the first night of the NBA Cup. The Cup is back, and it was a thrilling night of action on night one, and we got a few more weeks to look forward to. We'll also be looking into the identities of a few teams. Every NBA team has an identity, but in the early weeks of the season, there's a few teams still trying to figure it out. But before we get into that, Chris, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, and I'm especially good after last night, man. Those games, like it felt like playoffs. Why don't we just start there real quick? Like the vibe this year, this is the second year of the NBA Cup. We have a new name for it. It's no longer the in-season tournament. And I feel like there's still a little bit of questions as to like what is the role of these games in terms of like how we view the game, how we view the players. And I thought it was a great answer for that because we still have I think a lot of naysayers, especially in former players who are talking and covering the game. But last night felt like a statement night. Like you got competitive games across the board, despite what you would have assumed was a disparity of talent between a couple of those games. And it was just a good way to kind of start it off. And it sets the tone for the early goings of the season really well.
Yeah, yeah. Just the big problem with it now is just there's a few absolutely hideous courts that we have to watch in
I
certain
can't,
certain
why do
games.
we keep doing that's something I can't understand.
Certain games are just hideous. Like the Warriors court last night was lovely. That was easy to watch. It didn't feel too
Yeah,
different. But then you look at like the Celtics one, or even I know the Knicks weren't at home last night, but their bright orange court is just horrible.
it's awful. It's so hard to look at. But where do we start there? What game do we want to talk about first?
I guess we'll go for the big one, the Mavericks and the
Yeah.
Warriors. That was the war. That was the big ticket of the night. Klay returning to Golden State. The Warriors have been red hot. The Mavs have been struggling. But once again, it comes down to the clutch moments, and the Warriors just had it, and the Mavs didn't.
Why don't we start first with the intro and the tribute video that Klay Thompson got, and everyone wearing captain's hats in the scene in the stands. Like that had to have, I can't remember a better tribute video. I can't remember a better return, a more meaningful return, and a better way to honor their former star. Like that felt so like real. You know, a lot of it feels like service from other teams. It's like, welcome back. Here you go. Here's a video edited. And that's kind of it. But like even the intro, like the over the big speakers, the announcer doing the intro, it felt like a WWE intro. It felt like all hyped up and the whole crowd is super into it. And it was amazing, man. Like it definitely was a tearjerker for sure.
Yeah, it was impressive. Clay just had that blank face. He did a great job showing no emotion when that
Yeah,
video was
I
going
was waiting for him
on.
to cry. I was like, this. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm about to cry. Like, are you not crying? Like that. I mean, especially like looking back to his tape from his first couple years where he's talking to the media, dude. Just like it's insane to think that it's been that long. Like he's been in the league for that long, and now he's in a different jersey. And I think it finally hit on that night. But um, he starts hot. Him and Curry are going at it. He's defending Curry. But I think this game was more than zooming out from the whole Klay trade and his legacy in Golden State. I think looking at the current state of the Golden State Warriors, we talked about them last week and the week before that, and how they've been proving that they are in it this season, that they are going to be. I mean, we're not going to say contender yet, but I mean, I think it's time to talk about them as a threat because they're continuing to do what they do, especially against the Dallas Mavericks. Like, what did this game mean to both teams in terms of the landscape of the Western Conference?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the Warriors, what they do. It's like they play it like a million miles an hour, but it doesn't feel like that for them. They just like feel like they really like they're so swarmy on defense. Everything is
Yes.
just they're just always getting little touches. They're always doing the little things that just disrupt the other team's flow, and it's just so hard to play against. I think we especially saw it early in the game, and then also coming out of the half. That was when it was at its most intense. And it's so tough to play against because the other team feels like this is a race. This is going at a million miles an hour, but it doesn't feel like that for Golden State, even though they're the ones that are initiating this pace and this just hostile defense, hostile like everywhere. They're just so swarmy and in your face. And then on the get to the offensive end and just finding guys open for three. Draymond's hitting from the corner like he's Steph Curry. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I love the part of the Golden State Warriors that they don't care about size. They don't care about like doesn't matter. You got two centers going out there. Like Trace Jackson Davis, I mean, he's a forward playing in center. Draymond Green is a forward playing center. And they're playing guards at the wing. And they don't care because they move that fast. I mean, that's their I mean, we're talking about identity. Teams confused about it. They are not confused. They know exactly what their identity is. And going into this game, I think there was some discussion as to are they big enough? Can they rebound? Can they withstand the pick and roll attack? And they're fast enough to. And I love that that's the answer for it because you know in the NBA there's counters for everything. It's not just like all right, who do you have on your team? It's how do you maximize that? And they've really maximized the speed and the defensive IQ collectively of this group that doesn't matter if you're going to have bigs diving at the rim because they have guys on the perimeter who are fast enough and smart enough to, you know, give touch help, get a foot in the nail and get back. Like they're able to scramble, they're able to rotate. And I mean, are they the best defense in basketball right now? Like right now, I mean, it kind of feels like it. It kind of
Right
feels
up,
like it.
right up
So,
there.
and this game was a statement game for it. I mean, Luka has had up and down nights, and I mean, sometimes it feels like the Mavs kind of live and die by, you know, how many step back threes he's going to drain that game. And it feels like Kyrie has really just been a stabilizing force of them. Like, where would they be without him, truly? Um, but I mean, on the other side of this game, you know, where the Golden State Warriors have another statement win. You know, Curry is just a magician in the end of the fourth. I mean, when he gets in a rhythm, man, like he's just if you're not blocking the shot, it doesn't matter the switch, doesn't matter the height, it doesn't matter. Like he's gonna hit it. But on the other end of things, it felt like the Mavs are kind of seeking for answers a little bit. And quietly they're 5-6.
Hmm.
They're five
Yeah.
and six. Luka's not played his best ball.
We'll get into them more deeply when we're talking identities, but yeah, just the Mavs as a whole. Obviously, it was big for them to get Lively back last night. I think he's such an energy shifter for them off the bench. He's the guy that really can spark them into life when things aren't really going too well. That made a difference. They still had the shot to force OT, and Luca put up a terrible shot with like 3 seconds left
Yeah,
on the
I
game clock.
hated
It
that.
made absolutely no
I
sense. He
hated
had
that.
plenty of time to either find someone or get a better shot. The shot he took was absolutely awful. And just in general, in the fourth quarter, there was too many times the ball was in his hand. Kyrie once again had the hot hand, just like he did against Denver, and the ball was not in his hands enough. And like that steal that Curry got on Luca that led to the Melton three, that was just really lazy from Luca. He was just looking around for a pass, like there was no one guarding him, and Steph was easily able to get the steal. And just his overall play, Luca's struggling right now, and I think they're making a mistake. It's partly Luca's fault. I think it's partly Jason Kidd's fault. The ball should be in Kyrie Irving's hands more. We didn't. It was a problem in the game against Denver when Kyrie was red hot and the ball was still in Luca's hands too much, and they ultimately lost that game. And I think it was a problem again last night. They're still trying to figure it out. I don't know how much of this is Luca still recovering from the calf issue that made him miss preseason, but he's not playing his best ball, and they're relying on him too heavily right now. They should be willing to put the ball in Kyrie's hands more.
And Kyrie has just for the last few games like really blown up. Like he's shown like who he is, and it's amazing that he's having this like resurgence in the mat. I mean, ever since last year, but obviously it's first year like really full season proving it. Um, and cool too that Klay Thompson has a chance to maybe do something similar there. But Luka himself, I think we just expect more. Um, I think we expected maybe a little bit more from Najee. I think Najee's still getting into the flow of things, and Najee's not looked bad. It's just like
No, it's all
where
right, yeah.
where is the scoring going to come from outside of those two? And
Mhm.
I think everyone's looked fine, and no one's looked like bad in their role, but someone else needs to step up. And I mean, I don't know if you look to Hardy, I don't know if you look to Najee. Um, Grimes has unfortunately kind of looked like what his haters have said he'd look like. I'm still buying into the potential we saw in New York. I still think that's there. But
That
he's
step back
not.
three was nice.
It was, but the rest of the game, like just not consistent from three and not being, just not hitting some of the looks that you'd expect him to, and not really making his presence felt. And truly, like I know it's Steph Curry, but not providing that level of defense that you'd want him to. I mean, it's streaky. He's almost like a streaky defender at times,
Hmm.
and not for lack of trying, but again, maybe it is Steph Curry. I'm curious though. So, I mean, I don't mind you jumping into it now because I didn't have the Mavs necessarily as a identity team. I didn't have them as someone who I think is necessarily seeking for. But what are you seeing that you're worried about in terms of like what they what they
It's
are?
they're just not they're not the same team that they were last year, which was a faster pace,
Hmm.
especially second half season, faster pace, great defense, 3-point shooting. So they're down across the board in terms of 3-pointers made. They were third last year. They're currently 16th, over two less makes a game. Attempts are down, nearly three less attempts a game. They were second last year. They're 17th this year. Percentage is obviously down. They're down across the board on free throws. They're 17th in pace right now. They were sixth last year.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I'm I think a lot of this is down to Luka's struggles, no doubt about that. But they got Klay Thompson in, and yet somehow they're shooting less 3-pointers. That makes no sense to me. They're just they're still trying to figure it out. And while I think it's still very much on Luka's performance, and when he gets back to his best, I think they'll make a lot more sense. But for right now, you're kind of like, are they trying to transition out of what they were good at last year? Are they trying to transition into something more, or is it just a bit of growing pains, a little bit of just getting Luka back up to speed?
Yeah, and it's so interesting to watch Luca because the best of Luca is just it's unbelievable. It's the one of the highest highs you reach in basketball when you're watching an individual performance, and the heliocentric basketball that he can produce by himself is amazing. But then when you start to like bring in other talent, like Kyrie, and I think that they've done a much better job, I think, over the last season and into this season, finding runs where Kyrie's hot and Kyrie's the focal point of the offense. Like it doesn't feel too unnatural that way. But I think that there's got to be levels to this team where you can maximize other guys without Luca just taking ridiculous shots sometimes. And like especially like you pointed to the shot at the end of the game, it's a game-winning shot. I mean, some of those don't look great unless they go in, it's make or miss. But there are other times where there's not a lot of motion on offense. And I think that was some of the negatives that we saw last season. And it's a lot of just, all right, is Luka going to make this? Because I think that you have a lot of, like, I guess I keep pointing to guys like Najee just because I think it's a great example of an off-ball player, super active, is going to move the ball, is going to set screens, is going to cut. And how much more of that can you get? And I think it's just really on the margins. I'm not worried about their identity per se, but 5 and 6. I mean, you lose to the Nuggets, you lose to the Pacers, you lose to here the Warriors. Like you're losing against good teams. Like these are tough games. These are close games. I mean, yeah, you got to win those games against the Bulls, but I mean, losing to the Suns too. Like they've got to get a statement game in there because it felt like I guess it hasn't felt like they've made a statement like, hey, we're back in this.
No, there's been a really disappointing start from them. I think I'm like super disappointed. Like I wanted to see, I know Jokic is doing it with less help, but I wanted to see Luka come out and have like similar sort of start to what we've seen from Nikola Jokic. I wanted to see him be full gangbusters mode. I didn't win MVP
Yeah.
last year. I lost in the finals. I'm going to show everyone that I'm the best in the league. Haven't got anything close to that. Maybe that's still recovering from the injury, but I've been disappointed with the start. And just the Mavs as a whole, their start, I really wanted them to come out with a purpose and put it put it out there and say this is the year that Luka really goes off in the regular season, and not just himself going off, but also the Mavs as a winning force in the regular season, which is something we've never really seen.
Yeah. Um, let's move on to Celtics and Hawks last night. Not the result I think anyone was expecting, betting on, whatever. But how exciting was that to see the Hawks get a real statement win? I mean, not too exciting out here in Boston, but I think as Missoula said, as Jalen Brown said, really just hats off to the Hawks who just had a tremendous game. And I think in terms of identity, if we're going to talk about them too, what are we? Like they were just a physical, defensive, rebounding machine led behind none other than Dyson Daniels. I mean, I've never been happier on a player island in my life. I've been kicking back. I'm getting a nice tan. I got my Corona out. Like this is my beach. Dyson Daniels Island is looking real good, especially with Trae Young out of the lineup and him getting the opportunity to be really like the offensive engine. I mean, like he's not doing anything too flashy, but his ability to get in the paint and kick out the floaters he was hitting to, um, like that is the major reason why they were able to get this game. It's just getting into the paint and scoring inside, and guys like Dyson, guys like Jalen Johnson, really putting their stamp on this game.
Yeah, I mean the Hawks just kind of have the Celtics number. The Hawks got a couple of wins over
Yeah,
the Celtics last year. They go and beat them again this year. There's something about Quinn Snyder is obviously he's got some sort of formula that he knows how to beat the Boston Celtics. And if unfortunately the team's just not good enough overall talent wise to really kind of maybe put that to the test in like a playoff series or something like that. Not to say they would win it, but it would be interesting given the regular season success that they've had. But unfortunately, the Hawks just aren't at that level to be able to do that. But last night was hella impressive, and what it just screams to me is that I think there's a strong element in Quinn Snyder's mind that he doesn't want to build this team around Trae Young and knows while he's here he has to. I'm not just saying that because they won one game without Trae Young, but it feels to me that Quinn Snyder is not too pleased with Trae Young being the poster boy of this team because what we've seen from Quinn Snyder teams in the past is they get the best out of whatever they are. So like if they have great defenders, they'll be a great defensive team. If they have great offensive players, they'll be a great offensive team. Right now they're kind of in limbo. They're not really either. And how big of a part is Trae Young playing that? I think pretty big.
so this is what I hate. Like we're already gonna jump into like the personnel and trade sphere type of conversation because I mean, in terms of I mean, let's get there in a second. Let's get there because I have a
Okay.
question about that. I do have a
Okay.
big question on that, and I think that's that. But to stay on the game itself and what we saw, I think what we can say about the Hawks is that they look different when they have Dyson Daniels, Zachary Sachet, Jalen Johnson, and I mean, Keaton Wallace. Who? Like it's funny because usually like last season, like when you have all these injuries from the Hawks, you don't have guys who are making a statement. And yeah, this guy shot 3 for 13, but I mean, dude was playing for his NBA life because he took 13 shots and he was really defending his tail off. And I just want to say that like the identity of this team in terms of a statement from this game, it felt like they were different without Trae on the floor. And I think that leads into what you're asking here because they felt like a team that could compete defensively, that could compete on the boards, that weren't so focused on honestly like pre-rotating off of their guys to help out Trae, that were able to stay home because Trae's not on the floor, and their defense maybe looked a little better for it. And it's just one example of it, but I think we've seen plenty of that before, where you do get a bump in that defense. But I guess the question I have that we move into, I guess, is this an identity that they can mesh with Trae Young? Now that you're really like you have a playmaker in Dyson Daniels, and you're having a budding star in Jalen Johnson who does a lot of the same things. Like he really is able to be disruptive on defense. Also had 3 steals, a lot of deflections, um, 1 block last night. Like, can those guys be featured as well while Trae Young is on the floor, or are those two things incompatible? And I guess that's just my burning question on it.
I'm leaning towards incompatible. I think this Hawks team, I'm gonna make a bold statement right here. This Hawks team would be in a better place if they had kept DeJounte Murray and traded Trae Young.
No, I disagree with that. I disagree with that. No, and all right, this is such a Dyson Daniels love fest, truly, and I'm gonna fully embrace it because I mean he just had a career night last night, so let's just do it. I think that in terms of a defensive playmaker, Dyson Daniels is a better defensive playmaker than DeJounte Murray, better on ball, better off ball defender. And DeJounte Murray's calling card is, hey, that's like one of the NBA's premier perimeter defenders. Um, and I think he's gotten a little bit away from that because he's more of an offensive playmaker too. But I think you upgraded in terms of contract value when you get Dyson Daniels. And there's still that question. Like Dyson is working on that 3-point shot. That could come along. And you still have Trae Young. In terms of just like contract value and what you can work with, like I think that now Trae Young becomes expendable in a way that you can build around Dyson and Jalen Johnson, Reese Shea. I mean, you have three, I think, building blocks of really good, really good role players. Jalen Johnson may be a borderline all-star type of player. And if you're working in the draft, I mean, that's something there. I think that getting Dyson on this team actually kind of starts to make this roster make more sense because he's not ascending the way that DeJounte Murray was expecting himself to be with the contract that he got.
I will say that my theory when I put that out there, I was basically just saying the exact same trade with the Pelicans went down, except it was Trae Young instead of DeJounte Murray. That was my
So
just
it's so
just
it's
straight
like
down there.
DeJounte Murray's team, DeJounte Murray, Jalen Johnson time.
Yeah,
Um,
and hopefully you want to hope that it translates into being Reese Shea's team.
no, I don't
No,
know.
the number
Let's
one
let's
overall pick. No, he's the number
no,
one
I
overall
don't.
pick.
I think Reese Shea is going to be like one of the best 3-and-D players in this league. He's going to be like one of the best 3-point shooting, switchable defenders, like great talent, but I don't think he's going to be a number one option. Like he
Okay.
does not have the bag to you throw him the ball and you expect him to do something with it. Like he's not an engine in any way, shape, or form, I think yet. But
But I'll just finish off on Trae Young, leading the league in assists. But guess what? He's 74th in assist to turnover ratio.
mhm.
He's averaging 4.5 turnovers a game. He's shooting 39% from the field. Only Kyle Kuzma and James Harden are shooting a worse percentage from the field when taking over 15 shots per game. Like he's been inefficient as hell. And I just don't know how far you can go with Trae Young being such a focal point of the team. That's just
Yeah,
my thing. I think we're
yeah,
starting to see that he has his limitations. And like all I was look at Trae Young and all I ever say is like all he should be trying to do is mirrors the game of Steph Curry in every single way that he possibly can. I'm not saying he's as good a shooter as Steph Curry or as willing to be effective defensively, but he just needs to be moving all the time, constantly trying to get open to get shots, not always be the initiator. And that's hopefully they're getting more of that from other players. But I just think Trae Young ceiling is getting lower and lower every month, every season.
yeah. I think the past couple seasons where we've seen his most inefficient self, we've been able to talk ourselves into the possibility that it's it's just an ebb and then there'll be a flow. But the flow hasn't come yet, and it's not come at with the situation being DeJounte Murray being here or someone else kind of disrupting, you know, his ability to get shots, his usage, and anything like that. It's just kind of been who he is. And I agree with you. I think it is time for the Hawks to really consider their future, and I think this is an opportunity to do so. I mean, the Celtics are in a team, and anyone who's talking about this game, like, oh, the Celtics don't care about the play, Joe Mazzulla cares about every single game. And the Celtics, I think, are a fantastic watch night in, night out because they compete every single game. And they won against one of the best teams in the NBA, championship team, and they won it off an identity that they don't have with Trae Young. And I think it's worth considering. And I think we're both on the same page with that. It's worth considering what the immediate future would look like if they could get off of Trae Young. Um,
Quinn
but
Snyder would be happy. I'm telling you that now. But yeah, let's stick out. Let's finish out talking about the games last night, the opening night of the NBA Cup, and then we'll get move in towards more in-depth stuff on the identity front. So next up, we go Knicks 76ers.
you must be happy.
Yeah, just good win. Just happy to see them be more competitive. I think it helped that the 76ers were also pretty bad. That would definitely help to that played into the Knicks' hands a little bit. But
Yeah.
good road win. Hopefully this is the start of a little win streak. We play the Bulls tonight, then we have two games against the Nets. I'm hoping we can go 3-0 in those games. That's my expectation. Jalen Brunson turned his ankle, it looked pretty bad. Thankfully he came back out. It'll be interesting to see if he plays tonight. Just looking good. loving what I'm seeing from OG Anunoby. Obviously, continuing to love what I'm seeing from Cat offensively. Offensively, it's looking great. Defensively, still the question marks are there, but liking what I'm seeing from the offense and always good to get a win in Philly.
Yes. I I think I initially wanted to talk a little bit about like the what the identity be for the Knicks, but I think in a positive way, I think it's starting to shape out. I think it's something that I'm not as worried about. Um, and I think more so this game made me want to focus more on the 76ers. Obviously Tyrese Maxey is out. It's going to be tough. I mean, how many hamstrings do we have across the league?
Yeah.
But we get to see a little bit of Jared McCain, so maybe this is a positive. I'll
I'm
quickly
loving
say
what I'm
that.
seeing from him. Yeah, I'm loving seeing what
Yeah.
I'm seeing from Jeremy
Yeah,
Kane.
and maybe this is a positive where you get the rookie the opportunity to get some minutes and really get acclimated in a way that you wouldn't have the opportunity to before out of necessity. And no, is he's not going to be a starter, but if you can get him to a point where he's comfortable playing 18, 22 real minutes per game, I mean, that's huge. That they need that sort of thing. And the fact that they need it is the concern for me, though. We loved their offseason. And yes, the injuries have been absolutely catastrophic for them with their two best players. But Caleb Martin, what did you think he would average if you have no Paul George and you have no Joel Embiid? I thought he would do more than 8.6 points per game on 41% from the field and 31% from three.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Kelly Oubre had a pretty solid season last year. And okay, he's a role player. I'm not going to complain too much about 13.6 points per game, but the efficiency is god awful. 39% from the field. And we'll just leave it at that. And it feels like the offense we assumed we'd get from those two alone was severely inflated. Eric Gordon has been pretty much non-existent, and KJ Martin has not really been in the rotation enough for us to, see anything meaningful for him. So the thing is, do they need a trade? And I don't want to jump right into trade talk right away. I mean, it's so early in the season, but it stands to be reasoned that a big talking point of the moves they made in the offseason was the existing flexibility to do more. And the fact of the matter is, we're looking at a team that I think still needs to do more because they don't have a bench that's able to make up for absences. Because Embiid's going to miss time, PG's going to miss time. Time Maxey apparently now is missing time. Who's going to step up? And they just don't have that guy.
Yeah, I mean, what do they put in the water in Miami? Like another one. That's Gabe
Yeah,
Vincent.
yeah.
We've seen him struggle since leaving Miami. Max Strus hasn't been overly impressive since leaving Miami, and now we got Martin as well. Like
It's the sun, man.
there's something going on in Miami there's got to be something looked into there. But no, like you're totally right, and like they're getting a lot of production from like Yabusele, but like he already looks like a guy that I think will get played off the floor in the playoffs. And like the second his shot is not falling, you're kind of like, okay, what the hell is he going to do for us? It's
Yeah.
been great so far, but I don't see it really lasting. It's tough to judge him. I don't want to judge Philly too much until we actually get to see a few games where the big three are all playing together, because that obviously does make a huge difference. And Embiid obviously struggled last night, still doesn't look overly comfortable. He definitely did look a bit leaner in terms of like his physical shape. He did look like he's lost that bit of weight that they've been talking about. Does that actually matter? We will see. Obviously struggled in his first night. He looked pretty gassed for large periods of the game. He really wasn't up to the pace at all. PG probably that was probably his best game as a 76er last night. Looked really good from shooting the ball, and just the general play was quite good. So I don't want to get too bogged down on the 76ers until we actually get to see them playing at full tilt, because it does make a huge difference. They've what did they even get you a full game with even PG and Maxi? I think did Maxi get hurt in that first game that PG came back?
Yeah.
Or yeah. So
Yes.
like
But I think that the reason that like that doesn't apply to them specifically is because of the moves they made in the offseason to create depth and the
yeah.
players that they saw on the roster. And I think we believed in that. So I think it's always interesting that, we assume a couple things a lot. We assume linear growth from young players, and we assume kind of just like static performance from some of the vets. And that doesn't always happen, and it's hard to account for that. Like you don't know who's going to continue to play at a certain level. I think to a degree, a lot of Miami Heat fans would say listen, Caleb Martin in the regular season, that's the Caleb Martin experience. And it's
Wait till you
true.
play the Celtics in the playoffs,
It's
baby.
like you just get him for the playing the Celtics, I guess. But and I mean Eric Gordon too, anyone would tell you, hey, like what did he do in Phoenix? Not a whole lot. So I think it's easy to get excited in the offseason, but now that we're here, I think it's pretty plain to see that there wasn't the there wasn't the splashy move that gave them the injury insurance because we know they needed it. This is the one team we know they absolutely needed it. PG is going to need time. MB is going to need time. We all know what PG looks like when he signs a contract. I mean, dude's going to miss 20 games. Seriously, I would bet all my money on it because every single contract year afterwards, he always misses extended time. But
Just
I
like
mean,
another certain former teammate of his, right?
but on the Knicks side, I feel a lot better than I did week two. I feel
Yeah.
better. And one small thing, just in terms of like role, as we try to figure out what everyone's role is, and I guess I'll leave that to you. Like, how do you feel about the shot distribution and the who's working on ball, who's working off ball? Like, does it feel like a team that's figured that out?
Not completely yet. That's still a working process. Even though it's going pretty well. I mean, they're the fourth ranked offense in the NBA. The offense has been clicking pretty
Yeah.
quickly. Cat has kind of fit in there like a glove. I think OG has really stepped up offensively over the last few games after a difficult enough
Yes.
start. And once
Yes.
Mikal Bridges really starts to find his shot again, that's when we'll know things are really going. And Brunson as well. I'd like to believe that the Knicks should end up being one of the better assisting teams in the NBA because they have so many guys who can make shots, especially when that when you got Hart, Brunson, Cat, Bridges, and OG. Like they should be spreading the ball around. There should be constant movement. They should be hitting the guys who are cutting, hitting guys when Cat get closed out on hard, things like that. That should lead to a lot of assists. The Knicks should be a team that continue to rise up the ranks of the league in terms of assists as the season goes on. And once I start to see that happening, that's when I'll really know offensively this thing is working.
I think what I liked about from OG as well, and we saw it last night, six dunks, I believe,
Yeah.
and all of them coming off of baseline cuts, off of running the floor, and also like he's spotting up and he's embracing that. And I kind of wondered that, they get him from Toronto, a team where he's been mildly vocal about, increased role, and a lot of that comes from, getting that contract, like you need to prove I'm not just a spot up shooter. I'm not just a defender. I'm not a 3-and-D guy. You can't put me in that hole. But he got his contract. So without really having to prove that he has that really next level on ball scoring. So for him to take a step back and accept his role and do it at an elite level, like those are the championship winning type of, developments from a player, I think. I think when you have those players that, yeah, maybe you do have a little bit more to explore in that realm, but you are so elite at these things and you embrace that and you do that. Like those are the kind of players, those are the kind of situations where that leads to, championship type contending level teams. And it's cool to see that happen.
Yeah. No, obviously that's really good. Like obviously, great win for the Knicks. Hopefully, it's the start of a winning run. But next game, we got talk about the Heat and the Pistons because that had a dramatic ending.
Let's start like specific play, like that ATO that we got from the Pistons. That was fantastic. To tie the game, getting Jalen Duren a wide open alley-oop right at the rim. Like that was absolutely perfect. Bam Adebayo was totally out of position. That the screen set by Jaden was just perfect. And I think not just the fact that it came down to the wire and then they pulled it out with good defense and just solid play, something that the Pistons could never do last season. They controlled the game for much of the the first, second, third, fourth quarter. Like they were controlling the game in the fourth quarter. I mean, Tyler Hero just goes off. But besides that, I mean, they did a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously, Hero has been the saving grace of the Heat, and obviously he hit the three straight 3-pointers to actually force the game into overtime. Like he had to come up huge to even make this game competitive. But like the Pistons, they've kind of flicked the switch, and we're getting to see Cade. He's kind of quietly shown how great he is. He hasn't
Hmm.
really overly done anything amazing. He's not like dropping 30 a night or anything like we're seeing like kind of from LaMelo Ball, but we're kind of seeing just how good he is now that he's actually been healthy to start the year. I think there's a clearer message on the court. They've got a few extra veterans in. I think it just make starting to make a little bit more sense in Detroit, and he is a big part of that. I feel like he's dropping nearly like a 20-point triple double most nights so far this season. Like he's kind of doing it all, and him as the leader of this squad, and JB Bickerstaff, who we know is a really good coach, and unfortunately, he just it just kind of drifted away a little bit in Cleveland. But we know how good of a coach he is, and it's really working. Obviously, they're not doing anything amazing to start the year, but so much more competitive, so much more organized. You actually have belief when they're going to come out and play their best that they're going to compete with most teams in this league.
Yeah, that's the main thing, that the vibe, and I hate to say that, but the two things there I think I really resonate with me is the veteran presence. I mean, the last night you get 17 shots from Beasley, and some of them very important. I mean, like sometimes you need that volume shooter, you know, like if especially when you have a guy like Cade. Like Cade Cunningham is going to create open shots. He's showing. I mean, he had 9 assists last night. He's showing that he still has that level of, Luka in him that we all love to talk about when he was coming out of college. That hey, this is a guy that just got elite vision as a forward. Beasley is a guy you need next to him. You need a guy who's willing to, every time he gets an open look from Cade, throw that thing in, and he's not going to be afraid of it. And he hit 5-11 for three, and he hit that really, really key three down the stretch they needed. You need that. I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. only took 6 shots, but I mean, in the 19 minutes, +6. Tobias Harris, like, we don't need Tobias Harris to be a star. This isn't Philadelphia. We just need him. Take the shots when you got it, rebound, play decent defense, and, be kind of a release valve kind of option. Like, you can be a tertiary player. And he did that masterfully. If Tobias Harris was not on that contract he was before, and he was just who he is, like, we'd be talking about, oh, this is such a good role player. And that's what he is right here. So I think it's awesome that they were surrounding Cade with those guys. But then you also talk about Jaden Ivey. I think just the look in his eye this season, like he looks so much more confident. I mean, he's not like having a bad play, looking back at the bench, be like, is Monty gonna pull me out? Like he's just locked in. I mean, defensively, like he looks solid. Like I think that this is the beginnings of a team that I think is gonna be in the play-in. I don't think that the Pistons are going to, drop off at all. I think they're only going to continue to get better with the way that Ivy and Cunningham have been, playing off of each other, man. I really like how they've been playing.
Yeah, I mean, what are they 5-7 right now? That's a playoff record in the East at the moment. So I mean, like
Yeah.
they're not, it's not like they're not like they're falling behind or anything like that. So they've obviously they've made a strong start, and we'll get into the Heat a little bit more later on. But what are there any other games you want to touch on? Obviously, Portland beat the Timberwolves. Bad loss for the Timberwolves there. I mean, we saw Portland throw out one of the worst games we've seen in like the last 5 years against that depleted Grizzlies squad, and then they go and beat the Timberwolves. That's a bad loss for the Timberwolves last night.
Yeah, it's funny that that's going to go a little bit quietly as you got all the fanfare of the Warriors and Klay's return, and then the Celtics losing to the Hawks, and then they just kind of get to sweep this under the rug as one of the late night games, and meanwhile, Robert Williams and Jeremy Grant go off
Yeah,
against
yeah.
that.
Yeah, then, maybe the key was just not having Nail get all dominating out there. Maybe that was the maybe that was the key for the Portland Trailblazers there.
Yeah,
But yeah, bad last Timberwolves. They're obviously still trying to figure things out. They can't be affording to lose games to teams
yeah,
like Portland.
and it's coming off of too, like blowing a lead against the Heat on Sunday.
Yeah.
Like, is there's still answers to be had for them. I mean, they're 6-5, and we love what we're seeing from Ant. I guess me and you disagree a little bit on that in terms of like the 3-point shooting,
Mhm.
um, but I think that they still need to find that level of defense, that level of like tenacity that's going to push them on into the championship. Like they wanted to last year, that they were so close to last year, and they're not going to get close to it. They really aren't.
No.
If they're not going to find that, it doesn't matter how much magic you're going to get from Anthony Edwards, but that defense needs to still be there. You
Yeah, no,
can't
that
let the Trailblazers get 122 on you.
yeah, the defense has kind of fallen off a cliff, and I don't you can't just put that all down to them losing Cat. Like there's a lot more to that, especially when you see the level of defense that Cat's been playing in New York. uh, Magic, there's not too much to say there. Easy W against the Charlotte Hornets. Obviously, it's nice to see the Magic picking up a few wins of late after they kind of struggled the first few games when Paolo went out. It's nice to see Franz Wagner really kind of doing his thing and putting up some big performances.
Franz is quietly been one of the league's more efficient post players. I mean, he's doing really a lot of his damage inside, and I think the Magic. I mean, they just need Paolo. I think it was so obvious, like how much of their success is going to be predicated on his ascendancy this year, and I think how do we view this team now? Do we view anything differently just because they've been struggling without their best player? I guess I
No,
I don't. I
no,
don't.
no.
I don't. I think that this team needed Paolo to be that level of player, and Franz is added to that, but I don't think Franz is at the level where he's going to be able to vault them. So good win for them, but I mean they really need Bankero to get back.
Yeah, that's and my fancy team also really can do with that happening as well. Yeah, and then final game of the night, the Bucks actually managed to win a game of basketball. Woohoo! The Bucks got the win over the Toronto Raptors. No Damian Lillard in this one, no problem for the Bucks. Won comfortably enough in the end. Grady Dick, your boy Grady Dick, had another big night. Somehow managed to shoot 16 free throws, which just sounds crazy for a guy like Grady Dick, but
Well,
impressive
it
from him.
doesn't. It doesn't. We talked about it. And Grady
Yeah.
Dick can get to the rim. And I think if you are still sleeping on Grady Dick, yeah, you probably are because the Raptors are what, 2-7 now? Sure. But this is a guy who's going to be, he's going to get all-star votes, not this year, maybe next year, the year after. Like he's going to be making his way up there because he's not just the league's best movement shooter, in my opinion, but he's showing through those getting to the line. Like he can get to the cup. He's attacking closeouts. He's doing a lot of these other little things, and he's just doing it in year two. I mean, I think nobody really was thinking about Grady Dick last year after week one. Maybe you thought about him in his fancy suit from the draft, but I think this season, like he is showing he may be one of the better players from that class. Like I'm very high on him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see it moving forward, especially with all the injuries that Toronto has. There's now just going to keep on seeing him get opportunities, and hopefully he continue to take them. But let's take a quick break here, and then we'll get into our identities of a few teams, and when we get back. All right, we're back. Identity is a big thing in the NBA. The best teams have it. The great teams have multiple identities, but there's a few teams so far this year that are still trying to figure out what their identity is. And one place we got to start with that is the San Antonio Spurs. 5-6 to start the year. Obviously have a lot of issues. Hopefully, Coach Pop, it's nothing too serious, but it's kind of worrying that we haven't really got any real clarification on that. So it kind of has you a little bit concerned, but hopefully that all gets worked out and it's nothing too big. But just generally, this should probably still just be the full on Wemby show, and we're just not really getting that so far, and I don't like it.
Well, let's start with the positive. In terms of what they're doing on offense, they're doing some things that we asked for. They're running a lot of five out. They're putting out a lot of 3-point volume. They shot 46 threes to the Kings 38 in that win. They shot 47 threes to the Jazz's 33, lost by a point. 39 threes to the Blazers, 32 threes the game before that. And they're winning the battle in terms of getting more volume. And maybe they don't have all the elite shooters they need to make that work, but they're doing it. So let's say positive on that. Um, Another positive defensively, they're not terrible. They are looking pretty good. And yes, they're elite when Wemby's on the floor, but
Fun fact, they're actually slightly better without Wemby. That crazy?
that's
How
that
crazy is
is
that?
crazy. And I gotta we have to dig into that. But on off,
Yeah,
his the
yeah. So
defensive
like
rating on
it's
off.
not like it's not a huge difference. So it's just this kind of plays into it. But like I think with Wemby they're at like 111.1, and then like obviously overall they're at like 100 and like 10.7. So like it's a small difference, but it's actually like it was complete opposite last year.
Hmm. Well, we'll have to dig into that stat maybe. No, I don't know why. You definitely don't see it on the floor.
Hmm.
Um, but on the offense, but this is something that's been talked about a lot this week in terms of um, is Wemby taking too many threes? Is he really impactful offensively? And I mean, I want to talk about that because I think two things with that. A lot of people are calling him to play more in the post, and I think he's actually been decent in the post. I mean, he's um, scoring really decently, the 72nd percentile in the post, and that's something that he's around like James level kind of efficiency at that. I think more of it for me is kind of not getting enough looks in the pick and roll. I mean, he's only getting about 3 possessions per game. He's only in the 52nd percentile. He's shooting 46% in those situations, only 1.13 points per possession. And that's not what you expect from Wemby and Chris Paul. I was expecting that to be a major point of emphasis. So I guess I'm not too surprised that the inside out game is not really working in terms of the 5 out because Wemby still needs to put on a little more weight and he's not playing too bad from there. But the thing is the shooting. Do you think he's shooting too much?
Hmm. Oh, 100%. I
Why?
mean, he's averaging 7.5 threes a game. Like
Okay.
that's like, yeah, it's great that he's able to do that, but like, no, like, he's that like that size of guy. He should not be shooting that many threes. Like his like points in the paint last year, he ranked 34th, 10.1 game. Pretty solid for a guy who wanted to obviously space the floor and for a young center. Solid enough. But now this year, he's only averaging 8 points per game in the paint, tied 49th in the league and ranked 18th among all centers. This dude is 7 freaking 4. That is a shocking stat. He should at very least be top 10 because obviously you need more. You need to have a bit more weight on you to really dominate like a Jokic style, but he should be way higher up on that list. He's only shooting 31% from deep on 7.5 attempts per game, just 45% from the field. Like he should be doing so much more. He's only averaging 12.6 points per game without three pointers. Amazingly shooting 92% from the free throw line, but only 3.5 attempts per game. I'd be much more comfortable if he was doing double that in terms of attempts and only shooting 80%. I'd be a lot more happier in that sort of situation. He's he should be like his whole focus should be dominating on the inside. And yet we're not going to get him up at like Jokic, Giannis sort of levels yet. That's obviously what the future has to hold, but he should be closer to it now than he is, and he could still turn this around. But to start the year, this has been a very disappointing start to his sophomore year for Wemby. Obviously, still really early. He could absolutely still turn it around in a big way, but I've been underwhelmed in a big way, and largely is because he's just shooting way too many threes.
I have a few thoughts on it. And I think it just comes down to the scope of your thinking. If the scope of your thinking is this season and right now, I agree with you. I agree that Wemby would be more efficient. And you talked about the averages, like I think the raw numbers, the totals across season are a little more striking. He's taken 113 shots outside of the paint in the restricted area compared to 47 shots in the restricted area, where he's shooting 78%. He's shooting 78% around the restricted area. So yeah, I mean, dude could probably average 25, 26, 27 points per game if he's just shooting in the restricted area. For sure. I agree with that. Maybe they get another win out of that, win or two. Maybe if he does that across the whole season, maybe they're instead of knocking on the plan, maybe they're definitely in the plan. Maybe that's the level of offensive player he is. But I have two questions with that in terms of scope. The long-term scope, which I think anyone who's a Spurs fan, anyone in the Spurs organization is taking because they just drafted the next generational player. So everyone thinks. Um, who do you want Wemby to be? And who could Wemby be? So matching up those two things is important too. And I think that who Wemby thinks he is and who the Spurs think he is and who he could be is a three-level scorer and a floor spacing big before anything in terms of offense. And at 7'4", I mean, you just tell me, when you take a look at the shots that he's missing, do any of them look bad? And I struggle to find a lot of like there's some shots where it's like like okay, like you didn't need to take that. Like that was a little bit early in the shot clock, or that was a pull up. You could have, taken your time. And maybe that's a little bit about like game processing for him as a second year player. Like was there more to the offense you could have explored there instead of pulling that shot? Sure. But I think the shots that he's taking though, I think you still have faith that as a second year player that could get better. And I think we also have faith that he's a player that could accelerate his development pretty quickly. So what do I want to see from Wemby this year? I want to see what does the final product look like in terms of like shot distribution and volume. And I think that if I envision Wemby as like his end game, like best player that he could be, I think he's taking 7, 8 threes a game because I think that he has that shooting potential. I think he does. And I don't think it's here now. But on the other flip side of that too, like in terms of not just like what you want to see from offensively, but the longevity. I don't think Wemby could be a guy that takes, 12 shots in the restricted area. I don't think physically right now he could hold up from that. And I mean, that's what we see from AD. I mean, AD can't hold up from that because of his body type. Like he's a long, lanky guy. And what happens when you're constantly in the paint? I mean, he's one of the most dominant forces in the paint, but he just can't survive like that amount of volume when we already see AD's injured. I think envisioning what Wemby's maximum potential would be in terms of longevity and his skill set, I think I'm okay with it.
Yeah, yeah, I get that, but I think obviously ultimately, like, what's the finished product we kind of want to see? I guess it's some sort of alien cross of like Karl Anthony Towns and Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's kind of like the blend you kind of want to find ultimately in Victor Wembanyama. And like, I'm not saying he has to stop shooting threes. I just saying I'd be a lot more comfortable if he was maybe shooting 5.5 threes a game instead of 7.5 threes a game. Something as like a simple adjustment like that. I would just like to see him look to get inside. I'd like to see them work the ball into him in the post. That just that little bit more. Not it doesn't have to be. This isn't end game. He doesn't have to be averaging 30 points per game this season. That I'm not going to say he's a failure if he doesn't do that, but I think we need to see more from him. And I think that the Spurs are still in a position where this is not an end game season. This is not a season where they really have to do anything or expected to do anything. So I think they should give him more opportunities and put pressure on him to show off more inside rather than keep on harping on and keep on going at the 3 point shot.
So you want him to post up more?
Yeah. Not like not saying like obviously like, I'm not saying he has to be like AD Jokic sort of levels of doing that. Just I always want to see him do it more than and kind of a couple of less 3 point shots.
Yeah. I mean that's fair. I don't think that's unfair, especially like in the short term of things. And we'll see as a team, and I think he's definitely dragging them down a bit. Before Vassell returned, I mean they're shooting 30.7% from three. They're getting the volume up, they're getting the shots they want, and I think that's largely what this is going to be is. And just bringing this all back to identity, I like what they're doing. I like that they are trying to develop an identity around, ball movement around the perimeter. They are sprinkling in the pick and roll now a little bit more with Chris Paul. Their pace plummets when he gets on the floor, and it's this total opposite thing from what they had last year, much faster team. Um, but they want to spread the ball around the perimeter. They want to shoot more threes, and they want to create space for Victor Wembanyama. And I think that once they establish that concept, that's when so many things open up on the interior. You're not going to get constant harassment from the perimeter when you have no shooting threat. And I think they're building that. So in terms of identity, I think they're at least, they're moving in the right direction. It's not falling yet, but it's moving in the right direction. And hey, dude, they're one game from 500.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we were wanting to see from the Spurs at this point in the season.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely fair. It's definitely obviously a big improvement on last year. But let's flip it from a team that are still very young to a team that we have high expectations for and that we expect to deliver this year. The Miami Heat, 4-6 start to the year. The defense, that's usually their calling card. They have great defense and they work off of that. Defense is not quite at the level that it usually is this year. Jimmy Butler hurt again. He was struggling before he got hurt. Bam's shooting completely non-existent.
I
If it
thought he was
weren't
going to
for
shoot threes.
if it weren't for Tyler Hero, where the hell would
Yeah,
this team be right now?
nowhere. I mean, can we? Do you have hero stats in front of you?
Yeah,
You, like
25, 5 and 5, 48% from
Yep.
three on 4.6 makes per game.
On 9 attempts. On 9.3 attempts from me on the arc. Um, just got to tip our hat to Tyler Hero, who I think, I mean, you've seen it on the floor too, trying to be more of a, facilitator in the early goings, really has to take on the burden of scoring. So it's been great for him. I think a jump for him, and I think a jump that we believe in as well. I don't think anyone's looking at this and being like, oh, it's just early season. I think we believe in Tyler Hero's offense. We do.
Mm.
Um,
Problem is he's the one he's kind of maybe slightly overperforming what we maybe expected, that everyone else is actually underperforming so far, especially offensively.
Yes, and I think that the most disconcerting part is not only Jimmy Butler, I mean his averages are down, but I think more concerning is the minutes and the performance of Hame and Jovic.
Mm-hmm.
There's not been a sign of a jump from them. There's not been a sign that they're getting to that next level that we thought maybe they would have, in terms of what Heat development has done for guys like that. Same thing with Kalel. I mean, yes, he's a rookie, but we saw flashes in preseason and summer league. Maybe he's a guy that they really start to develop. He's behind Thomas Bryant. I mean, when's the last time Thomas Bryant was in an NBA rotation? And Thomas Bryant's looked good, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, that's your first round pick is Kalel Ware, a guy that you think that you can rock with in the long term. So I'm thinking in terms of identity, I was wondering if this would be a season of development, of youth, of that would be them replenishing their talent cupboard, so to speak, that has felt a little barren and feels even more barren now. It's just not coming around. Like Jason, or not Jason, Terry Rozier. And I'm happy to see that he's getting more shots, but he's are we going to sacrifice the development of other guys for his usage?
Mm-hmm.
How much more of Josh Richardson do we need to see? And how far do you think this team can even get if at its apex, if you're going to invest in all these older guys and not just fully just let the young guys play? That's a question that they have to answer on top of the whole Jimmy Butler question. And I think in terms of finding identity, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers.
Yeah, it's pretty all over the place. And like obviously, like you say, you don't criticize the Heat, and I always try to criticize the Heat, make a call on them, and like it feels like I might be finally slowly, maybe I might be right this year for once, that like they need to. I don't know, is the switch just gonna flick? Is that how this is gonna work? Is just gonna are they gonna hit a turning point where things just start to look more like a Miami Heat system, or like even like we can look back in a month or two at the mistake that Eric Spoelstra made last night and just think about that was like that's just a sign of the way this season is gonna go for this Miami Heat team, because Spoelstra, like such an experienced coach, probably the best coach in the NBA, making a mistake like that cost the team a win. I mean, it just feels like unimaginable that something like that could happen. And like, is that going to be something we look back on if you want to think, God, that just kind of sums up the entire year that the Miami Heat are having?
Yeah. I I'll never be ready to call it. Like if you got an answer out of me, you just needed it. Like I couldn't say that they're out of it. I just couldn't.
Especially
Really.
Nice, because obviously everyone, like the third place Nice is still 5-5 right now. So I mean,
Yes.
let's not go crazy. They're 4-6, but yes, in terms of identity, the Miami Heat definitely do not have one, and it's going to be interesting to see which side of it they kind of lean towards as the season goes on. Do they try and fall back on their defense, or do they really try and put a push into offense behind Tyler Hero? That's going to be very interesting to watch.
Is there a Dame trade to be had?
Maybe, maybe.
I'm
Let's not
mostly
rule it
kidding.
out.
I'm mostly kidding. I'm mostly
Mostly
kidding.
kidding. That's the important
Mostly
word there.
kidding.
Mostly kidding,
I'm
because
mostly
it's
kidding.
kind of in your mind. But let's stick in the East. Let's talk the New York Knicks. We mentioned them briefly. 5-5, slowly starting to show more signs of getting closer to what they expect to be. But this is a Tom Thibodeau led team that is pretty weak defensively. They were 10th last year. They're 19th so far this year. They were first in offensive rebounds last year. They're 21st so far this year. They were second in second chance points last year. They're 10th this year. The hustle and grit is kind of gone. Does that come back just when we get Mitch back? Or is this a sign that they're going to have to divert and Tibbs is really going to have to show his growth and really kind of go all in on the defensive side or the offensive side of the ball and build their success off of that, because that's what it's been early in the season. And let's be honest, it hasn't really worked. They're 5-5. Haven't really beat anyone of note. They've kind of beat teams that are struggling, like the 76ers, like the Bucks. So it's they still don't really know where they're going. Hopefully, we get slowly move towards that grit and grind that we saw last year. That's what the Knicks were. They were just going to play harder than everyone else. They were going to be so disruptive defensively. They're going to be play so hard on the glass that it's just going to be too much it's going to overwhelm other teams. They're not playing that sort of way this year.
What do you feel like has been different about the defense the most?
I mean, just Cat being terrible. I mean, we've all seen that stat going around that opponents are shooting over 91% in the restricted area against Cat. I mean, that's just appalling. That's really
Does
bad.
that feel real? Does that feel like a real stat on the floor?
Yeah, when you watch it, yeah, it feels like he gets scored on easily and just makes stupid fouls. Still, so many dumb fouls. It's so annoying because we need him on the floor offensively. He's so huge for us, but so many games you'll see him have 4 or 5 fouls, and at least 3 of them, one will probably be offensive, and 2 would just be lazy. So few of them are actually him like challenging someone at the rim or anything like that. It's just like, oh, someone's gonna run past him. I'll just step in front of him. Or it's just little stupid things like that he still does, and he needs to get out of his game. And I hope Tom Thibodeau is constantly working with him to try and get that out of his game.
Yeah, he would have to be the cat whisperer because that has never happened for his whole career. Interestingly, the Kings are, in terms of defensive rating, they have, or the Knicks rather, have the best defensive bench rating in the NBA. Is that a hope? Is
And
that
they
Miles
also
McBride
play
effect?
the fewest amount of bench minutes. So it's the
And
smallest sample size.
it's funny you mentioned that because they do have among the lowest minutes in the league. And by among, they have the lowest minutes at 123 minutes. But in those 123 minutes, racking up the best defensive rating. I mean, I guess what I have to say to all that is this is always going to be about the offense of Jalen, the offense of Cat, and the defense will come along because you have all those playmakers, you have all those stoppers. But how do we feel at this point? Because I think there's a little bit shaky faith. Like, is Jalen Brunson having a step back year? But if you look at his numbers, I mean, he's in terms of efficiency and volume, like still there. I mean, it's just not to the magical level that it was last season. And there's a couple
Surprisingly still there. I
here
mean,
and there.
he's been in that mold where he's kind of had like extremely inefficient games and also extremely highly efficient games, and that's why his levels have kind of evened out to start the season. Because like I've watched a lot of games and he's just missing everything, throwing up bricks. But obviously he's had games like against the Bucks where he was throwing up bricks in the first half and then it evened out in the second half, and it was similar enough in the game last night too. So I like we talked about Brunson last week. I still think that like when he really starts to click offensively, and obviously, like I said earlier on, when they're starting to get the passing and they're starting to rise up those assist ranks, that's when we know this team is really clicking offensively. And then hopefully we get Mitch back, we get Precious Achua back. When that happens, that's when we'll really see what this team is truly made of, and that's when we'll really see if they can get back to like the grittiness, the defensive side that was their calling card last year.
Hmm. Yeah, I believe it. I still believe in this team, and I still believe that they still have another level to go. And for all the fouls that's been frustrating with Cat, I mean, Cat's having a career year offensively so far. He's
Mhm.
looked comfortable, and he's looked like the focal point at times. And I think that's what's nice is that maybe Brunson has off games here and there, but you have a reliable second star, and I think that's the big upgrade over Randall is that you know what you're going to get out of Cat night in, night out. Um, and surprising to me that he's maybe not having the playmaking year that I thought he would have. But in terms of his aggression
Nice.
offensively, it's been great.
Yeah, he showed it last night. He obviously had 6 assists. He had a few nice little dimes, and then hopefully that's an area that we could continue to see more of. But obviously the Knicks have kind of been flirting with going 500, and then they're one game back of 500 just to start this year. But I expect them to be 8-5 by the end of this week with a game against the Bulls and 2 games against the Nets. I expect the Knicks to be 8-5, and that's the start of them going on a strong run. That's my expectation for New York. But let's just flip quickly to the other side of New York, the Brooklyn Nets. Just got to
Mhm.
mention them quickly and just say they're just competing way too much. Like they're only 4-6, but they've just been too competitive. They've been matching up with teams. They've been winning games they should never be winning. They've been competitive in pretty much all their games. Obviously, we love to see it, but this is a team that needs to tank. They need that number one overall pick. So maybe the trades might be coming a little bit earlier for the Nets. Maybe they won't wait to the deadline to make these trades. Obviously, still early doors, and maybe they could collapse with the team they have still. But I think we could maybe see a couple of trades happen earlier because this is a team that can't afford to rely on a late slump. Because look at like the likes of Toronto, Utah, and maybe even the Pelicans with all the injuries that they're having.
I here's one thing with it though. I think that we need to remember that the Nets, they also have Milwaukee's first round pick. They have New York's pick. They have one of the most complicated swapped pick situations that I don't understand at all, and I'm just going to call it a swapped pick thing between Houston, Phoenix, and OKC. But it will be a pick. I think it's the second best of the three, if I'm understanding correctly, and a second rounder from Miami this year. They're locked in for couple picks. I mean, we'll see what the Bucks do this season. But it's looking like it at least will be, at least in the early 20s if the Bucks have this miraculous turnaround. And I preface that to say that, what's most important here? Is it just about tanking, or is there value in developing a identity, and especially a coaching identity? And I think it's really looked overlooked, but you get in a new guy, you get in Jordy, and you want him to develop as a coach too. I think his development matters almost as much as whoever you get in next, that next generation. So I don't think they're going to sustain like a near 500 pace. I mean, who are they beating? I mean, they're beating a Memphis team with injuries. They're beating a Chicago team that, could probably win or lose every single night, but will lose more often than not. They won against Milwaukee, the hapless Milwaukee Bucks. I don't think you're too worried about some of the dubs they've had. Yes, they've beat New Orleans, but say they come outside of the other end of this, they end up having, like the eighth best odds. But they've had some moments this season where they're like, hey, like this is our identity. This is how we like to compete. This is how we can be defensively. This is how we can move the ball. Cam Thomas, like passing the ball a little bit more, but also being really aggressive, knowing who he is as a scorer. Like those are benefits that would be huge if you do end up winning the lottery or you end up moving up in the lottery. Because now you not only have that talent, but you don't just have some like broken, totally like morale deprived team of losers who just spent the whole season being told by the organization go lose, having a coach who's been told to lose and strategically is losing. Like that is the kind of culture that you put a fresh prospect into, it dies there. How many lost NBA prospects do we have across the league because they went to an organization that was not ready to develop them, did not have the culture to like cultivate any real winning there. And look at I mean, the Pistons, they're in danger. I mean, we hope that this is a good season, but they have two lottery picks there, three lottery picks there that, could go sideways. And it's not out of talent, but because of, development. So they're in a risky spot here. And the Nets, I think they're doing the right thing. I don't think they should tank. I think they should keep competing.
Yeah, I respect that. And like, obviously, even if they don't tank, they could still obviously end up with a top five pick, and this is meant to be a stacked class. It's just the thing, like, the interest is obviously they're on a great. They're going to be one of the only teams that are in a position to offer big contracts next year in free agency.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's not going to be too much of a stacked free agency class, but that's what's interesting about them. If they were to get a high round pick, they'd also be able to add in a few veterans around him right from the off, which I think would be hugely important. And like, look at like Cooper Flag looks to be all the part. Yeah, I know we've said this a million times. He looks to be all the part. So I mean, you can understand any team that would be willing to tank for him, but maybe they could get lucky. Maybe they could go and do like an Atlanta Hawks or something like that, that we saw last year. It's not all about the tank. This isn't the NFL. Just having the
Hmm.
worst record doesn't get you the number one pick. So obviously you can respect guys who are teams that are continuing to compete. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to watch the Nets moving forward and see if this identity sticks with them.
Yeah, I think I think they're doing the right thing. I mean, and if you look at Tankathon too, like it's funny, like Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Dallas, Minnesota, Sacramento. Like obviously this will not be the finality of it. It's so early. But just looking at some of the competitive teams that are currently looking at a lottery level record. It's some tough early starts to some of the best teams in the league that we're considered best teams in the league, and just so much parity. Like there's so many 500 teams. You don't expect Brooklyn to stay there forever, but we got teams like the Clippers. I mean, they're competing. They're up there. Houston's firmly out of that echelon of being a bottom level team. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Obviously, it's been obviously an interesting season at the start. Obviously, all the injuries have been devastating to like a lot of players that were having such great starts. I mean, obviously, we see Chet going down, which is obviously a huge blow for him in OKC. KD going down. He was having an MVP level start. Zion again, he's out indefinitely. There's so many injuries going on across the league, and like hopefully that starts to cease, and hopefully we get guys like the likes of Embiid back and healthy moving forward. But yeah, the injuries have really played a lot of teams to start this year, and other teams just having really bad starts, like the Bucks. I mean, let's just finish out there. The weekly Bucks vibe check. They're now
One, we're now at one, DEFCON one.
we're there, but
I'm there.
they're. I don't think they can afford to actually sack Doc Rivers. I think they're the money they're already paying out on coaches and that. I'm not sure if they're willing to bite that bullet on Doc Rivers, but they're 3-8. Uh,
Darvin Ham's right there.
yeah, he's ready to go. I mean, like 20th on offense, 18th on defense. They were sixth on offense last year. Think about that. I mean, just looking at the team, still we don't see the consistent level of the Giannis Dame two-man game, which should be as devastating as we see from like Jokic and Murray and guys of that nature. The Giannis Dame two-man game should be right up at that level. Then you look like is Brook Lopez cooked? Like, is he finished? I mean, he's averaging 9.4 points per game on 39% field goal percentage. Like that is shocking for a player like him, shooting terribly from three. Gary Trent Jr., they were like, oh, what a steal. We got this guy on a minimum contract, and he's literally playing like a bad guy on a minimum contract. Like his numbers have been absolutely appalling. 6.4 points per game, 29% from the field, and 22.5% from deep. Like, what is going on with him? Everything in Milwaukee is just bad on bad on bad.
Yeah, there's nothing more to say about it. And I think that um like realistic that the Giannis watch has officially begun, and it's there's two sides of him that it's been interesting to see. The joyful Giannis of the championship contending Bucks, and then now, almost being pegged as like this childish, sore loser Giannis who's getting toxic in the locker room. And I think that, the media is going to spin it any way they want to. But I think ultimately, like, he's a guy that is desperate to continue winning, and it's not going to happen this season. It's clear it's not going to happen. Um, so I'm at DEFCON 1 because once you make that realization, like it's really hard to make that realization this early in a season. You have to be very like spectacularly bad, and they've been spectacularly bad. And it forces the conversations in the front office and amongst his team. Like, what do you do? I mean, how long does a star at his level just tolerate that? Um, I don't know what the next move is here. It's so early. I've never seen a trade for a team of their potential caliber this early, but you have to think there has to be something that would happen right away.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like big ball is about to drop. I mean, like you look at all the teams that kind of made big trades over the last few years. Like look at the Suns. We're seeing year two of that, and it's starting to actually look like it's making
Yeah,
sense.
a
Like
good point.
there's other teams that have made like big time trade, and like they just needed that second year for it to start to actually look like it was the right move. And then you look in Milwaukee, and a year two, all it's showing is that it was the wrong move, and it's far closer to blowing up than it is to succeeding.
Yeah, I will. I'll leave it at that. But we're at DEFCON 1. And by DEFCON 1, by definition, I'm panicking if I'm a Bucks fan. And I'm panicking as, like as a casual observer of their success in a general Giannis fan. I've been happy to see, the little brother of the Bulls, Milwaukee, the little brother of Chicago, be so good and be so consistently successful. But I think that has come to an end, and every good thing comes to an end. And that's just like a general observation you make of teams when just there's so many factors into it, but you can't be good forever. And this might be kind of the beginning of the end. Um, so DEFCON 1, that's where I'm at. I don't think there's any way to fix it. I don't even think they make a move. I just think this is a slow descent into what ultimately will be the final chapter of Giannis and Milwaukee, unfortunately. But that's just what the tea leaves are telling me. On a brighter note, do you want to close in a quiz for you? I
Sure
think you'll
thing.
get it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, let's go. Let's go.
I love going through some interesting stats throughout the season. And one of them has to do with this revolution of three-point shooting we've seen this year. And it's a whole big discussion of, are we taking too many threes? Whatever. Are the biggest stars taking too many threes? Threes. Who is the best two three-point shooters, pull-up three-point shooters specifically? The shot that everyone hates, the shot that everyone thinks is ruining the game, pull-up three-point shooting. We're doing too much of it. Who are the two best three-point pull-up shooters in the NBA? Can you name them? And I will give you 5 chances.
Jeez. Oof. What are we thinking here now? This could go. I feel like it's not. I feel like they're definitely two guys that you wouldn't expect. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they're not from the Warriors and they're not from the Celtics. Would I be correct in saying that?
I'm giving you 5 chances. So basically, I'll give you the opportunity to shoot 40% from three, which I guess we would say is pretty good. So I will not answer that question.
Okay. Let's see. Is Kevin Durant one of them?
No. But you know what? Since you throw out an answer, I will say that your presumption initially was correct. It is not a
Okay.
Warriors player. It is not a Celtics player.
Okay. Oh God, who's really even? Is Anthony Edwards there?
That is one. Anthony Edwards shooting 44% on 86 attempts. For reference, only, I believe, 6 players are shooting over 80 attempts. And of the 2 players that we're mentioning here, Anthony Edwards is one that is shooting over 32%, which is the highest, the third highest. Jason Tatum was the third highest pull-up three-point shooting shooter over 80 attempts. And we need you to name the second.
Let's see. Um, Kyrie Irving?
No, not even close.
Not even close. Damn.
Not even a terrible guess, but the percentages here, again, and 44%.
Yeah.
And the number 2 guy, not too far behind him.
Let's see. Okay. So what I have two guesses left,
I
right?
will I
So
will say
so
it's in
give
the
me a
East
conference.
Coast.
East
East
Coast.
Coast.
Okay. Okay, let's see who have we got in the East. I guess Darius Garland?
Ooh, that is incorrect.
Oof.
I will give you one final clue. He is in the same draft class as Anthony Edwards.
LaMelo?
LaMelo
No.
Ball
Yeah.
is shooting
Yeah.
40% on 90 attempts. These two
Damn.
guys are on absolute fire,
Wow.
shooting beyond the arc on pull-up jump shots, and it's not even close. If you pull up the numbers, Jason Tatum, like I said, third. He's leading the league in attempts, I believe, at 92 attempts, but he's shooting 32%. Everyone else shooting far below that. I mean, these guys are just on an absolute heater. And I'll admit, I was one person who's kind of an Anthony Edwards three-point detractor, but it's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. Well, obviously I needed the help, but yeah, I get
You
there
got
in the
there.
end.
You
I'll
got
take
there. I
I'll
knew
take a
I knew you were gonna
passing
get
grade.
ants. I knew you were gonna get ants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take the passing grade there and then I would move on. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's episode. The NBA Cup is back. And it's what the NBA wanted it to be. Uber competitive, lots of fun, and hopefully that's what we see through over the next few weeks. It runs obviously up until the 3rd of December. Every Tuesday and Friday, we're going to see NBA Cup games. Yes, the courts are still hideous, but the competition is still a lot of fun. So looking forward to seeing more of that. Looking forward to seeing how things continue to deteriorate in Milwaukee. Do things really start to get better in New York? Still so early in the season. There's still so much to cover, but we'll have a cover for you here on Coast to Coast. But for now, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you all so much for listening. Remember, we're everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.